won't keep you here too much longer, but we just figured we'd give you some basic information on what we're planning on doing this coming week or so. And if you guys have any questions or comments or anything about what we're doing, so
Yep,
go ahead.
Okay. There are thousands of videos of Bigfoot on YouTube, on the internet, anywhere you want to look. And most all of us that see them can look at it and say, well, that ain't real. Right? Is there something you use in your mind to say if it's real or not?
Appreciate your question. We're trying to move on to salamanders here, but I know that's an important question. So does anybody want to address?
Well, I think this also ties into the whole idea of what we're dealing with, discovering a potentially unknown species. There are a lot of cases, a lot of accounts where you have, if you put a graph together or correlative issues, there seems to be a trend with certain things: size, height, region, all these different ideas. When something stands out way out of line, like it's totally disproportionate, this is something we were talking about, how this is a way you can kind of gauge. It doesn't mean it's impossible, that it's already fake, false, a hoax, or a lie. It just, when you see a concentrated group of data and then something's just way out of line with it, that might be a good indicator that it might not be a valid account. It's not possible, but when people say they see a 15-foot plus tall Bigfoot, that kind of, to me, is a little bit eyebrow raising. I don't know that it would make sense, like we've talked about, for some of these creatures to have a stature which our environment doesn't really support anyways. It makes us wonder, are these people really seeing something like this, or is this just being misidentified? Is it being misconceived? Did they actually see Bigfoot, but it was only 8 foot tall, but they don't have a good frame of reference, so maybe he was taller? So I think, you can. I think if you look at the general body of anecdotal knowledge, cultural knowledge, and then you get these accounts that just veer way off, that might be a good indicator just to make note of, if not anything else, to show that there are cases of Bigfoot, of salamanders, of any of these creatures that we've talked about today that might not really fit in with this even already unconventional body of reports. So, what do you guys think?
Who's going to wear the wet suits when you go up there?
No,
That water's cold, huh?
Thank you for your question.
Our contact in California.
Let me do like a 5-minute historical context unless someone else wants to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, because a lot of people don't know about this. So the Trinity Giant Salamanders, it's actually a mystery within a mystery. And what I mean by that is that the first references you hear to these creatures are actually in Bigfoot literature. So like if you go back and read a lot of the old books by Ivan Sanderson and John Green and some of those Bigfoot classics, sometimes it's just a passing note. They'll say, oh yeah, and there were some sightings of giant salamanders in the same areas, where Bigfoot was seen around Bluff Creek and stuff. So sometimes they called them alligators, but they obviously what they're describing, sounds more like a salamander than an alligator. Jim or someone else might address that. But anyways, the first historical sighting that's really known of happened in the 1920s, and there was a guy named Frank Griffiths that allegedly saw 5 of these giant salamanders in a remote lake at the head of the New River, which is in the Trinity Alps, or in California, right there near Bluff Creek. It's a little mountain range. And he claims he saw it, and then that created kind of a fervor. And then in the 1940s, there was another sighting where a guy named Van Harden claimed he, again, saw several of these 8-foot-long salamanders and actually hooked one, apparently, and measured it. And this was at a place called Hubbard Lake, or became known as Hubbard Lake. So we're going to be camping very close to this area. Now, we also found out we have contacts on the ground there. We're working with the Bluff Creek Project, which are a bunch of guys that have been up there in the Patterson-Gimlin film site for 12 years, setting up trail cams, and they found the actual spot where the film was made. They're interested in the salamanders, and a guy named Jamie Wayne, and so they have local sightings that are even more recent. And even Native American legends, the local Yokut and Hoopa tribes talk about the Klenewak, which is supposed to be a long serpentine water animal. So anyways, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. old stories. There have been expeditions that have been mounted before. Ours isn't the first one. There were some in the 1950s mounted by a marine biologist named George Rogers, and I think he came back skeptical. And then a Japanese American journalist named Kauntze in the 90s. So there have been other attempts made to find these giant salamanders if they exist. So anyways, that's where we're kind of starting from. Is it's been a while. We have some resources there in the area that have scouted areas and locations for us. And why not? I'll leave it there and open it up to you guys if you have anything to add to that. Or
I've got friends saying we're going to find Bigfoot because we're not looking for it.
we're going to be there too. So I mean, who knows? That might happen. You want to talk about?
Well, I guess I could say something about the fact that there were also fossil giant salamanders in the area up until the Ice Age. There was a species called Andreas matthewi, which was actually related to the giant ones that we see in Japan. And it hit a length of roughly 6.5 to 7 feet. So almost exactly what was being reported with these. I'm not sure that's what's out there, but it is a possibility. It's also a possibility it's something else if it's real.
We need to think about also, for the different sightings throughout the years, of course, just to think critically about what the alternative could have been if in the event that these weren't salamanders but people were seeing things. What else would have been the most likely creature or animal that exists within the area that they could have misidentified for a possible giant salamander? So that's something that I think it works with any of these mystery encounters, but especially when we know there's a fossil record, people have been seeing something consistent. It's important to not immediately jump to conclusions, but also use your deductive reasoning to understand that maybe some of these sightings were just cases of misidentification of other species that they didn't really get a good look at, or they didn't know were already there. So that's something you have to keep in mind in any of these things. So hopefully we can do, as we're able to document our effort and not only going out there, but getting some footage of at least some regular salamanders that are known to exist within the area. And then of course the main goal is to see if we can discover and find definitive proof that there are these giant ones out there as well.
In terms of methodologies, you guys might be curious about that. I think we have a pretty good team here in terms of a lot of knowledge about animals and different skill sets. So we're going to try to be as scientific as possible. And so we have, basically we've been looking at how do other surveys go on for other species of giant salamanders and stuff. So I've consulted with biologists and people that have searched for them and stuff. So we've got a number of cool gadgets, underwater cameras, an underwater ROV or submarine, baiting techniques. So we're going to try and deploy a lot of different methods. The water that we're going to be looking in is generally very shallow and cold and runs fast. So we may have a guy in a wetsuit. That's going to be Jamie. Some of us will be waiting, per Jim's suggestion, to look for larvae, because just because a giant salamander doesn't always have to be giant. It could be little first. We're going to be looking for salamander larvae and netting. And basically we're just going to be doing surveys of these creeks and lakes where they could potentially be. And it is going to be uninvasive. In other words, we're not going to go in there and tear up the habitat. We want to demonstrate that you should be, if you pick up a rock and look under it, put the rock back. If you turn over a log, put the log back, and just try not to disrupt the environment. So
Not really looking to kill one and
we're not going to, even if we find one, I don't think we're going to attempt to take it. We're just going to photograph it, measure it, and maybe, we were going to consider eDNA, if you guys know what that is. Taking water samples. They did something like that at Loch Ness in 2018, 2019. A couple of issues there. One is price. There is a fisheries lab in Sacramento called Genadax. It's like thousands of dollars to have the water. There's like a minimum payment, and it's expensive. So that was one consideration. Plus, there are fisheries, they don't have the proper primers. When you do eDNA sampling, you have to have a base set of primers so you kind of know what you're looking for So they would have to have salamander
Yeah.
DNA samples that they could compare it to. So that's one issue, which could drive up the price. Also, you have to apparently keep the water samples frozen or cold until you ship it to the place. So we're going to be in a pretty remote wilderness area, so even if we took water samples, we'd have to immediately freeze them, keep them frozen for days, and then ship them frozen. So, I don't know, we kind of, unfortunately, I think we bowed out of that a little bit just because it realized, man, this would be like, maybe next time, this would be a major project to try to get eDNA samples. So.
And it's not always, well, you know, there's something that came up on that show, Expedition Bigfoot, where they thought they came up with like chimpanzee DNA using the eDNA, but some people think that that's because they were handling chimpanzee pheromones. Wasn't that it? They think that maybe because they were handling that, it got mixed up with their testing process and it came back them thinking. Maybe that's the case, maybe not, I don't know, but you know, so it's a tricky process, and yeah, it's time sensitive, and you got to make sure you do it the right way.
Contamination's very easy when you're taking genetic samples.
How long are you guys going to be gone?
We're going to be up there. It's a 2-day drive each way. It's 32 hours, 33 hours. So we're breaking that up. So we're actually going to have 3 full days of research. And we might also do some nighttime research because some salamander species are nocturnal. And so we're going to do our best to just go full steam ahead for at least 3 days. And then the 4th day, we might actually, to Jason's point, we're actually going to go to the Patterson-Gimlin film site because none of us have ever been there, and that's like Bigfoot Mecca. Plus, there's also water, areas there that we can investigate. So at least 3 to 4 days is going to be our actual boots on the ground time.
So if you should come up on one salamander, what are you gonna do? What is the plan?
The plan is to contact the rest of the team and get them down there so we can manage to photograph the thing, document it, if possible, get it to where we can actually measure it.
Yeah, that would be really, showing the scale would probably be one of the most important, because we could find a little one and then someone take a picture and say, wow, this is 8 feet long. It's like when you hold a fish
Take the
up to the
picture,
picture, yeah, like as close to the camera as you can. But yeah, to Jim's point, that's really important part.
Then, of course, after we've done that, we might take a tissue sample, a small one, and then release it back.
Yeah.
I actually have some diving gloves that have really good grips on them. If I can just run it along the side of the body, that would be great DNA right there.
They are slippery, but yeah, we're not going to harm. No salamanders will be harmed in the making of this expedition. I think we're all on the same page. But that's a great question.
Are y'all filming this, or is it for later viewing, I'm assuming?
Yeah, we're going to attempt to piece together everything we can from just the whole excursion and make sure to just get a good all-around view of the effort, regardless if we come up with anything or not, just to document and to also tell about a bit of the history of the sightings and the local lore, and then what people have been seeing up until now and what we're looking to find. That, like Ken said, the methodology, what we're using behind trying to find it, and really just to show the main goal would be to show that there's something there. I think the secondary to that, or maybe even as important, is to show that there are accounts of things that are unknown. I mean, we're all interested, or at least know about Bigfoot, but aside from that, there are still other animals out there that aren't Bigfoot, that aren't known, that is a big part of what we do in cryptozoology, is to look at some of these other stories, accounts, reports of different animals and sightings of these things that have been known throughout the years, and to make an attempt at just figuring out, seeing what's there, doing what we can to get boots on the ground, take a look, and ask people. So the person that I mentioned here, Jamie, he's going to be taking us to some of those local spots where they've had stories, and really just getting into the whole process of not just we're here to try to find it, but what led us here, why it's important that we look at these particular areas, and what we can do now, to see if there's anything to it. And if we don't find anything, it doesn't mean that our efforts were for nothing. It just shows that it's important to do what you can to follow up with anything. As an investigator, field work is an important part of just understanding the process of getting information, and even not finding anything is information. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that we might, the probability of capturing something, I think at any given time is really low. And a lot of times the people have seen these things, it just seems that they were in the right place at the right time. And then you could start looking at other things like, Ken had talked about looking at weather patterns, looking at local, areas of people, of known things. And so all of those, I think, when you look at the bigger picture, it adds to an important part of this concept of something that exists there based upon all these other tangible points that we can interact with, which are people, stories, places, known biology, known specimens, known relatives perhaps, and then just go from there and do what we can to just be there really, and see what we can find ourselves.
We are planning on doing kind of a low production value documentary, where we don't have, obviously if we're going to focus our energy and our resources on the investigation, it would be impossible to put a lot of work into that. But I have asked Daniel, who's an excellent cameraman, and all of us to take pictures, videos, and try to piece something together so the general public can see what happens or what doesn't happen.
And then as Ken said, we investigated other people that were looking for salamanders. Maybe in the future, somebody's going to be looking at what we did, and it might give them an idea, or, hey, I could do that, or I could do it differently.
Yeah, it's all about progression. If we don't find nothing, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means we found no evidence of it, and we might have found ways not to go about finding it. So any kind of information like that is always helpful in these matters.
I want to, I'm hopeful that we can set an example, as they're saying, to other researchers and cryptozoologists and future. I meet a lot of kids and young people that are into it, which I think is awesome. That might be, someday doing what we're doing. But, I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of misperception about cryptozoology, and, it's starting to get dragged, some elements more into the paranormal realm and this and that. So I think we're all trying to set an example that, okay, let's do this. We're not being endorsed by a university or a major, National Geographic, but let's put our best foot forward and try to do this as professionally as we can and as scientifically as we can, to at least look and search and, follow that process. And I'm hoping to set an example to other, even if they're not searching for salamanders, but some other cryptid, that they'll say, hey, you know what? I want to go look for the Ozark howler, but I got some ideas from these guys. Giant frogs. These guys set a good example. They're looking at it scientifically and objectively and stuff. So, anyways,
I think as just some people use the term citizen scientists, it's important to see that not all discoveries are made by scientists. Sometimes people who are attempting scientific work can make discoveries which open the door to more academic and scientific groups getting involved, simply based off of the notion that people are curious, they're getting out and they're wanting to do the work, and might not always be credentialed scientists, and I think that's an important process that a lot of the people in not just the Bigfoot community, but who are into cryptozoology in general, is for the most part made up of people who are either enthusiasts or extremely interested, have had an experience and that brought them in, or doing what they can to contribute some minimal part in this overall direction and to gather information. And it's information gathering, but it's also an understanding of what this could potentially mean in the event that, let's say, we do actually discover and document a giant salamander that was not known to exist there, but there have been only these reports of. It would mean that it's possible. It doesn't automatically verify all of those reports were true. It could mean that possibly they were, but maybe that some of them we need to look at these historical accounts a little bit better, because they lend opportunity for real things to be discovered, and then other groups, other institutions, universities to get on and get on board and eventually, maybe sponsor or have a grant or something that actually could be an important part of a biological movement or something that opens up more opportunities. So I think that's a really big part of what all these people, all of us here are really doing is to really just be interactive with what we can, and whether we're scientists or not, we can do our best to make scientific efforts or use the scientific method and just do what we can to talk to people, talk to locals, talk to those who have had an encounter or story, and then just use that as a way to kind of go in with a little bit of background about knowing the history behind it. And that's why I think it's important to highlight all of these different sightings throughout the years, because it's not like we're just throwing a dart on a map and saying, let's go here and just check out salamanders. There's a reason why we're looking at these places, and it's because there's a history of concentrated activity and sightings. And I think that, again, as an investigator, it's important to follow up with those things when you can, and the way we're doing it is to just be as reasonable with it as possible, and to make sure that we document those efforts. So
How did you choose this project or the salamanders, or how did they come about?
I can tell the story, but either these guys could. So this Jamie Wayne from the Bluff Creek Project on a Bigfoot Facebook group put up some post about the giant salamanders, and it's always been an interest of mine and probably all of us to look into this. And I saw my friends Jim and Jason both post, we should go look for that. Yeah, let's do that. And so I got on there, and I was, not that I'm taking credit, but I was like, no, seriously, let's do this, You said, let's do it. I'm in. And so the three of us began talking, and I think Daniel was a natural fit to fill out the team because we kind of all knew him and knew what he could bring to the table with technology and, a lot of the things he's able to do. So it kind of just started as like literally a Facebook post, and just, people saying, let's do it. And then us just kind of moving to action. Like, no, we could really do this. We could really go look for these things. So.
Since Jamie Wayne's local, right, in the Bluff Creek, how far are the Trinity Alps from there? Does he know anybody that has dived in the water there, or has he?
I don't know if he has, but he works with local wildlife biologists that do like salmon surveys and stuff up there. In fact, he's bringing a young lady apparently who's up there, a geologist. So he's familiar with people that look. They do a lot of salmon surveys up there. So that's the main thing. So the water's going to be cold.
Yeah,
But they are in it. They are in it regularly
when
during
we first
their
started
work.
talking about it, the first thing I did, I was looking at Japanese giant salamanders, and I was watching them going down, along rock faces and looking for them.
Yeah.
They were, they pulled them out, a couple of them. And I said, well, that's probably the best way to do it. Has anybody had any experience snooping at catfish that's going?
I never do.
Are you going to put a wedge a big one on Jim and send them down?
I've always thought, I've never done it, but just thinking, you really have to commit to putting your hand in and then just, catfish is one thing, but, it could be anything in there.
Yeah,
So,
right.
I don't
They were
think-
reaching in holes and stuff, but I think you could see them, a couple of them, and they would somehow get
Presumably we
from out
can
of
see
there.
him.
we've got some ways to kind of view underwater with
Yeah.
the submersible, and then going to get some camera work down there under the
Several
water too.
underwater cameras.
So that at least will help. I mean, us seeing it is one thing. Us being able to capture something for others to see through,
Yeah.
the documentary will help to kind of give context to, going in, because I think some of there are lakes, and then there are just shallow rivers, and I think it's supposed to be that salamanders are more inclined to be around the shallow rivers, but they've been sighted around like actual lakes and
Been
things.
reported by the
Yeah.
lake.
Yeah.
Some on land. There are some sites which doesn't fit into our typical paradigm, but there are some of the sightings where people said they saw them crawling on the ground. So we don't really know what we're looking for at
You
this
think
point.
they'll be easier to find at night or the daytime? I think, the little I know that at night is when they're going out to explore their environment more, and daytime they're kind of holed up. hiding.
Are salamanders, generally speaking, Jim, are they nocturnal? or-
Very much so.
Yeah, so most salamanders, big or small, I think, are nocturnal.
Are there any salamanders that are iridescent?
Actually, as it turns out, most amphibians are bioluminescent.
The bioluminescent, okay.
Yeah, you hit them with UV light and they light up.
Well, there you go.
And yes, I do have a UV spot.
Good questions, Glenn.
But all the sightings have been during the daytime.
That's
They're
true.
just missing their opportunity. Just walk out there with the $15 flashlight and, oh, there it is.
There it is.
Some of the sightings weren't people actively going out to find them or like search for them, and then you do have other efforts like what we're doing with those who have gone out to try to find evidence of them as well. So just like with Bigfoot or any of these things, it's not really always people going and looking for these things. It might just be someone happening upon them.
Yes.
But it's also to highlight that Bigfoot is not the only cryptid, and this is a big part of I think what we're doing as well is to showcase that cryptozoology encompasses all kinds of creatures, and so that's another big reason. I mean, we're all interested in the research behind the Bigfoot phenomenon as well, but this actually helps us to get outside of that box a little bit and to work in the broader field of cryptozoology.
That's it for me.
That's all I can
Good.
think of.
I just wanna say good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What you looking for?
And to something Daniel said earlier, there's a good quote which is, the next best thing to having the right answer is having the wrong, or next thing to having the answer is being wrong. So, I mean, I'm comfortable, even if we don't come back with evidence, that's still evidence that they don't exist. So, I mean, I don't know how these guys look at it, but we're just, we're there to gather information.
Still a mystery.
But we appreciate your support. Just by coming out here today, you guys really helped us out in terms of getting us a kickstart. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think we were all going to be mentioning was that we'd like to also dedicate this in part to the McDonald family. Of course, Glenn's done an awesome job throughout the years. Appreciate his support and really dedicating it to his son PJ as well. Thank you all.
Thank you all, folks, for spending the afternoon with us. We really appreciate you being here, and we wish you all a safe and happy 4th of July holiday.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.